Hello and welcome back to another edition of the President's Corner. I am Kirk LaDu, the president of Parallel Employment Group. Today I am joined by a special group. It is our executive committee with Parallel. I have Candy Rudzinski, our Vice President of Operations. I have Renee Devine, our CFO. And I have Clay Pouts, our Vice President of Sales. Combined between the three, there's over 60 years of experience, just about. So there's a lot of experience in the staffing industry sitting at this table. We have gathered this esteemed group to be here with us today because what we're going to do is address some of the myths that exist within our industry from both the clients' end and the candidates' end. One of the big ones, and it kind of goes back probably to the formation of our industry did start to really address the temporary needs that offices had when they needed to fill in maybe for a receptionist, just clerical positions. And so one of the questions I often get is do staffing agencies only do temporary jobs? That's why we were known as temp companies, etc. So I put that out to you guys. I'll start with you, Candy. Staffing agencies are only for temporary jobs. How do you address that myth?
Yeah, that's a myth that I hear often as well. And being able to support temporary assignments is certainly one of the things that we do really well, and one of the reasons we are in existence. But being able to support temp to hire and direct hire opportunities is very common. It allows job seekers to come to us and have the ability to have access to 10 or 15 different companies quickly, so that we can find the best job for them. That often leads to long-term permanent hire.
Yeah, I think it's grown where, with the risk of hiring today, more companies are looking to, just to use a euphemism, drive the car before they buy it. And the candidate as well, they get to, find out if this is the right culture, the right position, etc. Clay, you're on the front lines as far as the sales are concerned. You must deal with this. What percentage of companies that you are dealing with would you say are even looking for true temporary work in today's world?
That's a good question. I would say the percentage of companies exclusively looking for temporary only type candidates is very low. I would say maybe 10 to 15% of our customers fall into that category. Most of them, especially recently as competition over candidates has gotten even stronger, really need us as a resource to help them with their temp to hire positions as well. So we see a lot of mid-skilled and even higher skilled positions that are temp to hire, and some of those even fall in the category of entry level as well, that are really a pathway to hire within the company.
Okay, great. I know one of the myths that we hear is the cost of using an outside agency. I know that was one of the objections when I was back in my sales day I had to overcome. I'm sure you and your sales force still hear that. It's expensive to use a staffing agency. Renee, you are our CFO, so you're dealing really with the minutiae of the financials related to our industry. How would you respond to that?
Certainly the reduction in costs are apparent in recruiting. Turnover in employees definitely have a cost to organizations, but there's also administrative burden like payroll, the administering benefits, that all has a bearing on the cost of the organization. There's hidden costs that sometimes don't get acknowledged in the cost of downtime, maybe a turnover. So a staffing agency can help to fill that gap so that there's not downtime on the organization.
You also handle workers' comp within us, and then workers' comp is a pretty significant cost, not just the potential cost of the injury, but the management once someone is injured.
Yeah, it's certainly in the administration, the employee overall benefits, and workers' comp is an enormous portion of a lot of these organizations that we staff for.
There also is a cost just to recruiting and finding people. It is a reason our industry has grown and is continuing to grow, is I think people want to transfer that burden of hiring and just the cost of especially in a tight labor market. Candy, that's more, you're on the front lines of that. How would you address that?
Yeah, I think being able to absorb the onboarding, the screening, the job board management, it's costly. I mean, advertising on Indeed now, I mean, it's thousands of dollars for multiple positions a month. So being able to take that burden off the client and have the efficiencies we've built around our program to get somebody from the day that they apply to the day that they can start producing and benefiting the client is very short, because that's our expertise in what we do. I think the advantage there is when clients really, you know, start uncovering all the costs and the risks that we absorb, they're pleasantly surprised at ultimately the cost savings that they sometimes will see.
And I think, and Clay, you probably are the one that can better answer this, again, being in the sales end, especially when the labor market really started to tighten up, you know, a little more than a decade ago. You started to have potential clients who had never used an outside agency before that were starting to explore that possibility, because it was becoming so hard for them to find candidates on their own. If you could speak to that, Clay, and how that's impacted the business.
Yeah, of course. I think the market has definitely changed our industry quite a bit, and a lot of factors have played into that. But we've been forced to be creative in our pricing and the way that we push out our programs to our clients to make sure that it's meeting them where it meets their needs and where it really is effective for them, both from the pricing standpoint, but also from the cost per hire standpoint, and in the end that they're getting good employees that they can eventually hire or use in the capacity they need. So we're really creative that way, whether it's overtime markups for those type of billing hours, or what we call in tandem, which is a hybrid type bill for direct hires that's worked out really well. We're always trying to be creative in how we present that to candidates and customers.
Okay, great. One of the objections that we do hear out there on the client end is a concern of whether or not we understand their industry well enough to adequately meet their needs. And I think part of it's a control issue. They're afraid of giving up that control because they know exactly in their mind what they're looking for. Clay, you were the one that would definitely still be dealing with that as an objection. I know that is still heard by our sales crew. How would you respond to that?
Well, I would say that's a myth that's busted. I think we're not an expert in every single industry out there, but there are certain industries that we certainly have a really high level of expertise in. A lot of those fall in that light industrial category. I would point to food production as one of those, for example, that we know very well inside and out. There's a certain level of intricacy to food production. GMPs, there are a lot that goes into that because obviously we need to protect the product on the back end. And that's an industry that we are truly involved in. We're even Fab Wisconsin members. We do a lot to understand an industry and meet them in the places that need to be met from a labor standpoint.
I would also suggest that it is important, as Clay said, to understand the industry that we're trying to staff for and the unique features to that business. I would though say that a good quality employee generally tends to have the same attributes and the same attitudes, whether they're in the food industry or whether they're in heavy manufacturing. I mean, Candy, that's something you deal with regularly. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I think we take a lot of pride. One thing I think that sets Parallel aside is that we aren't just trying to fill an order. When a new client, there's a learning curve, and we work really hard, and Clay and his team do a great job of setting up on the front end what the expectations are, getting the program going, but it is an ongoing program. We work hard to be an extension of the HR team of our partners and have a true partnership where we're learning as we're going and adjusting. So not just what's hard skills they need, but what soft skills work for that culture. What are the supervisors' likes and dislikes? What does the environment on each shift look like? And really job match from there, and not just the basic skills matching. We take pride in having quality candidates over quantity. So we're not an agency that's going to throw 5 candidates at you. Our goal is to have you interview 2 people for, a need of 2 and hire both. And that's when we see the true value, really is that connection and partnership with our clients.
And as you said, we try and be an extension of their HR team, and that kind of leads to you, Renee, because it doesn't matter what industry they're in, it doesn't matter what product they're manufacturing, or what their business is. At the end of the day, a lot of the HR issues are the same. And how does that, how would you respond to that, from a background standpoint?
In our HR team, if we were looking to use an agency, we want a partner. A lot of what Clay and Candy had said, that a reputable agency is going to know my industry. They're going to build a recruiting team around it, because an HR team just wants it to be fast and correct, right? The candidate to be what they need and as soon as possible.
Okay, great. One of the myths you hear on from the candidate side is that agencies don't really care about job satisfaction, that we're just interested in getting a fill. How would you respond to that, Candy?
That's one of my most frustrating myths, because the recruiters and the teams take a ton of time to do their best to job match. And at the end of the day, it's a lot of time spent. And to have a candidate start a job and it not be what we presented is a lose-lose for everyone. The candidate's disappointed, the client's frustrated, we're back to square one, starting all over. So really there's no benefit to us. It's ultimately time-consuming, it's expensive to not find the right fit. So our goal is to, during the interview and the screening process, is really do our best to make sure it's a good long-term match. We are just as happy as the candidate and the employee and the client when somebody gets converted and hired on. So our reputation depends on the success of both the candidates and the clients. So that is one thing that I know everybody's a little disappointed to hear.
And to your point, it hurts us in a multitude of ways. And one is, if that candidate isn't happy, that isn't a positive image that's going out on the street. And word of mouth is our lifeblood for recruiting. That is, the vast majority of people who enter into a lot of our branches is because they heard that we satisfied someone they know in their job search.
Yeah, ultimately that job search, it's our responsibility to do everything possible to find the right fit for the client, for the candidate. And from there, we have to rely on the candidate to, put their best foot forward and, show up with the work ethic that they presented they will. And that's ultimately what leads to a success and a positive outcome.
I know back in my sales day, one of the real frustrations was the perception by the clients that we're all the same. Every agency is the same. There's really no difference between any of you. I have to believe you're still hearing that, and your salespeople are still hearing that. So how would you counter that?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's something we do still hear pretty often in our market calls. And I think back to the point that Candy was making, one of the big differences with Parallel, I believe, is how we start the process with candidates and continue that process throughout the tenure that they have with Parallel. So it's a very specific touch point. We sit down, we talk with those candidates and do an interview and find out more interpersonally what they're looking for. We take that information, and really what I've seen, those recruiters develop relationships with those candidates in a long-term sense in some cases. And those candidates really start to buy into that process, that recruiter, and trust them. And I think as a company, we've done a good job of really bringing trust, transparency, and professionalism to every level of what we do, whether it's on the candidate side or on the customer side. We want to be honest with our customers. We also want to address issues with customers. But we are professional employers. In a number of ways, we can help and be a really strong resource for, again, both candidates and customers.
I think you hit on something. We are a professional employer. And if your main core business is manufacturing widgets, then you should know everything there is about widgets and the widget market. You're not going to be a professional on the employment end, and nor can you be. And employment has changed so much, and it's become so much more complex. In the time I've been in this industry, it's changed dramatically. Our name, some of you may know, used to be PA Staffing. We changed our name to Parallel Employment Group because we wanted to make sure we weren't just being viewed as a staffing agency. We We wanted people to understand we are a professional employer and we offer services beyond just staffing. We have competition that is fine with just being viewed as a staffing, and there's nothing wrong with that. If that's really what you want your only focus to be. We realize we're doing so much more, we have so much more to offer, and that kind of leads me to you, Renee, because you manage the back office from our accounting to our HR to our safety. And there's a lot of things we offer in those areas. Could you expand on that?
I think probably the biggest service that is out of that group is the safety, and our ability with our carrier and our broker to be able to go to a client, advise them on their safety protocol, give them tips and tricks to be successful in their organization, and it's not necessarily a punitive visit, it's at a request of the client, and we want to do this, and we can provide that service for those clients.
And it's serious dollars that are being impacted. You're dealing with workers' comp, where in workers' comp losses can be substantial, and we are not just talking thousands. In some cases, you can be talking hundreds of thousands, and hopefully no one's experienced that. This is watching that, but it can get to the millions. Then you also have the issue of OSHA. You have to be able to navigate OSHA and their regulation. And we have an expertise in all these areas, and part of our job, we feel, is to minimize your risk in those areas, which should impact your bottom line. One myth out there that has always caught me off guard, but we definitely hear it, is on the candidate side, applicants will come in and their concern is that we are going to be taking money out of their check. So on top, we are going to just literally be removing dollars from their paycheck. Candy, I'm going to start with you on that because you're, in the branches and you hear this.
Yeah, I kind of thought that myth died, in the 1990s, but it's still around, and our branches still have to explain that to some candidates. So there is zero fees to any of the candidates that come in. There is not a penny ever taken out of their paycheck that isn't related to taxes or, personal garnishment that they have taken out anywhere. And in addition to that, all of the services we provide is resume building. We do a lot of coaching. We help prep candidates for interviews. All of those are added value that we provide for our candidates with the sole purpose of having a positive outcome and a successful placement that leads to conversion when that's the ultimate goal. I think that's what separates us, is it's not just about billing hours or getting an order filled the next day. We built a 39-year-old business if we didn't take pride and really have a serious focus on retention and the basics of staffing is finding the right fit from the beginning and working smarter, not harder, to make sure we're dotting our I's, crossing our T's. And that's one thing that I continually hear, and I know Clay does as well from our clients, is we do what we say we're going to do. We don't overpromise and underdeliver. We are solely focused on retention. And part of that starts with how are we preparing our candidates to be successful when they're on assignment. So that was a long-winded way to say no, it did not.
But I would add these myths come from somewhere, and this one, we hear it too often that there isn't something happening out there. And I would just suggest to anybody working for an outside agency that if you are having money taken out that isn't related to the employment burden, that to me is a red flag. Yes, you're going to have unemployment taken out, you're going to have WICA taken out, your state taxes, you're going to have your federal taxes taken out. You should not be having other fees taken out related to your employment. And we've heard of some people that have, if they don't give 2 weeks, that their pay rate's going to drop to minimum wage. While that might be legal, it is not the norm, and you should find someone else to work with. That will not happen with Parallel. Your money is your money. You put the hours in to earn that check, and you deserve your full check. Do you have anything to add on this topic, Clay? I know you hear this as well.
Yeah, I think briefly I would say obviously we're a for-profit business, but as a professional employer, we still have a responsibility to our communities to support them, and this is one of the ways that we do it. Probably the major way we do that is giving people jobs and good opportunities. and certainly not charging anyone for that service. That again is our responsibility as a strong business and a strong employer in the communities that we operate in.
Okay, great. So I would like to thank all of you for joining me today. As I mentioned at the top, you guys all have a wealth of experience in the industry. I think it was an opportunity to address, a lot of the myths that we do here, and I just want to thank you for being here. Part of the allure of the President's Corner is bringing expertise in and addressing the different issues that are facing our industry.
Thank you.
Great, thank you for having us.